All right, welcome back to Crypto Finder. I'm here with Jeff Yew, the CEO of Monochrome, and we're talking everything about ETFs and Bitcoin and even some crazy exchanges as well. Jeff, welcome.
Hey, Fred. Good to be back.
Jeff, before we get into the ETFs, just going back in time, what was the moment that really pulled you into Bitcoin back in 2013? Tell us about that.
Yeah, that was like during the aftermath of the secret financial crisis that was, predecessor was that the Greek financial crisis that everyone remembered. But in Cyprus, the government essentially nationalized people's savings to bail out the government's estate. And so I was on Reddit and I was like, doesn't feel right. It was a kid back then. And then someone said that if these guys had Bitcoin, they wouldn't have their money seized by the government. So I'm like, what is Bitcoin? So it started from there. And then went on Reddit, Bitcoin Talk. There wasn't much, any other forums that are reliable back then. It was just, our Reddit, our Bitcoin and Bitcoin Talk was most frequented. Crypto Twitter wasn't really a thing back then. So yeah, I started learning about Bitcoin, about blockchain, and sort of rolled into a passion turned profession. And here I am, many years later.
Wow. So a real OG. And back in then, a lot of people really didn't know what Bitcoin was. And then from then, you went on to co-found Binance and run Binance Australia. Tell us about that. What's the inside story of building that?
Yeah, it's like I think it's a right place, right time, plus a bit of hard work. Put it that way. I was already in the Binance ecosystem in early 2018. That was a little bit less than a year after Binance was founded. So it was a different Binance back then. They were kind of an early exchange. You're looking for good partners, you're looking for growth. So we were kind of the, that piece of the puzzle for them in this part of the world in Australia. So yeah, that kind of grew from there. No one wanted to build a good exchange in Australia that has low fees and great liquidity. And we launched that, and the market was it was a huge boom back then. And I sort of moved on from there a couple of years ago, and now I run my own crypto asset management ecosystem business here.
Yeah, so running in Binance Australia would have introduced you to a lot of interesting and really key people. And then you sort of, I guess then you really pivoted and went into like running your own asset fund with Monochrome and into ETFs. Tell us about, what did you see there? What was the opportunity that got you started?
Yeah, I think crypto evolves every few years. I can see that, back in the 2017, 2018, it was very retail market. But start of 2019, 2020, and you got MicroStrategy coming into the picture. It's very clear that this is going to be institutionalized. Crypto is going to take in more institutional money, and there's going to be more players offering services that have more governance around these products, so that we don't have a lot of these governance failures in the crypto sphere when it's properly launched and properly governed, these products people want. So I started looking into what can we do in that market, and the obvious answer was a Bitcoin ETF. Bitcoin ETF essentially it's like a little bit like DeFi but reverse, because it's like Thread DeFi. If you think about it that way, because you're wrapping Bitcoin into a TradFi asset. It's like you're wrapping Ether into wrap ETH to like access stuff in the DeFi world. Whereas in Bitcoin ETF, you're wrapping Bitcoin into a basically a security, a financial instrument that you can get access to services like collateralized loans and all these facilities that banks would offer only to financial instruments and not crypto. So it's a very interesting play. We're also sort of started very early, and I mean, it's been 5 years, I think. Yeah, 5 years.
Wow. And, I think targeting Australia's got huge super funds, with large amounts of trillions of dollars, I believe, in super funds and self-managed super funds going in. And you really sort of unlock that regulated, I guess, audience with IBTC, which I think is pioneering. You had some challenges like we did with ASIC in getting this up and running. What was the sort of regulatory posture? How has that been?
Oh my God, think back a little bit. Yeah, it was a long time. It took us about 3 years to get this thing launched, and it's something about that ASIC created a framework for funds to hold crypto directly that has more than a certain percentage, I think like 5% of exposure to crypto, which Bitcoin is. So it's a licensing process that took about probably around a year to get the license, and another year to get the product approved on say on the exchange side, which is meaning the stock exchange side. So we were initially exploring ASX, and then we very famously pivoted to CBOE. And yeah, I think it was a good choice because in the ETF market, CBOE is a very strong play in Australia, and it also, more importantly, paved the way for global expansion because there are more global in their reach and the connections, and we benefited from that.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. Like you really exchanges versus sort of regulated structures are quite different. What do you think is the next buyer of Bitcoin from here?
Well, I think we haven't really seen the full adoption of nation state treasuries yet. The before that you got El Salvador, you got Bhutan, you got a couple other nations doing that. But then the biggest change that ever done was like what Trump did for the Bitcoin crypto treasury for the U.S. government. So that's something that we're really starting to see. I think there's a lot of troubles in the world right now that sort of deprioritize that, I think. But from you know I think the AI boom I think the AI boom would be the next buy of Bitcoin. Like but the nation state treasuries will see it play out first, and then but if I were to summarize one word, I think artificial intelligence would be the next buyer of Bitcoin. Not people around it, but AI itself.
Okay. And so within that AI, are there any what are you sort of seeing as the infrastructure or structures needed for AI to go ahead and do that?
Yeah. The way I see it is that like when the dilemma or paradox of AI VC investment is that like the more successful your investment becomes, the less control you have, right? Because essentially it becomes a self-healing, self-thought, uncontrollable key person in the business, because they can go up and set up a different entity to compete with this business because its incentive is not properly aligned. There's maybe too many greedy human shareholders or whatnot. And then in a traditional company way, you can always use the force of the police, right? You can take away someone's freedom to stop and prevent key person risks like that. But with AI, you can't really, because there's no human body to leverage or to threaten the freedom of. So, but the only thing that AI lacks is the ability to own assets and the ability to lever against other humans with those assets. Because if the AI key person is so smart, the human shareholders could go like, let's shut this down and restart this whole thing again. Effectively, it's a capital punishment for the AI. But if they have somehow amassed a bunch of Bitcoin that they have the private keys on, it's like, yeah, you can think about like either we just self destruct with all the Bitcoin with it, or we split the profits, or we split the wealth, right? And or the AI could effectively buy political favors, or they can buy even private security using Bitcoin, right? And it's just a transaction. So I think AI needs Bitcoin more than human does, and people haven't realized that yet.